Hey there everybody, Brian Von VA got a question for you today. What is the most egregious loophole that players tried to use at your table? Let us know in the comments below. Today's sponsor is History of Heroes. Come witness the backstories of up-and-coming adventurers, hand-illustrated and dramatically narrated by the Forever DM, from before they made their first appearance in the best available. Link in the description. My players tried to convince me that since traps are unexpected, that the enemies that fall for their traps should get disadvantage on their saving throws. I said, sure, and when you fall into a trap, you will also get disadvantage on your saving throw. They suddenly didn't like their idea for some unknown reason, of course. While free-falling, a PC declared the ground as their enemy. I think there was a 4E mechanic that allowed you to shift any direction to avoid taking melee damage from an enemy. They wanted to shift 5 feet upward. After a good laugh and a DM veto, I think they settled on twisting their free-falling body in such a way that a health potion would shatter on impact, slicing through skin and clothes and restoring HP. It was a silly and memorable campaign. Oh boy, all of these are from one player in one session. They were playing the old UA Lore Master Wizard, and were trying to pull some shenanigans. The first instance was trying to use the subclass's alchemical casting feature to change the Pass Wall spell. They were trying to say that they could use the feature to cast Pass Wall, and also expend an additional second level spell slot to increase the tunnel distance of Pass Wall from the usual 20 feet deep to 1 mile. Even though the feature explicitly states that it can only change the range of the spell. So, like, you could cast the spell on an object a mile away. They then later cast Fireball, and when a target we did not want injured was in the AoE, they argued that because that target was behind a barrier which did not extend to a ceiling or walls, that they would not take the damage. We pointed out the clause in the Fireball description where it says the fire spreads around corners, and so the target would be hit with the damage. The player then tried to argue that the clause only applied to the fires lingering afterwards that are started by the spell. Later on in that fight, they cast Jim Ward's Magic Missile, which is similar to regular Magic Missile but requires attack rolls. After clearly calling his target and being told that one of them missed, he then tried to claim that that missile had been intended for a nearby target that we knew had a much lower AC. We called him out on that one, because that's not just a bullshit interpretation of rules, that's just outright cheating. Yeah! That was that player's last session in that game. Can we do ourselves? The GM created some homebrew monsters that splashed damage every time they took damage. I didn't use a reaction and had no limit per turn. I argued that this means if we put 2 of them next to each other and hit one, the damage should reflect back and forth until one died. The DM laughed, said no, and we continued playing. Had a player do a roundabout way of trying to attack with their weapon on their hip without penalty. Because the rules don't technically say you have to have the weapon in your hand, they use the descriptor handheld, which can easily be inferred to mean size-wise not held in the hand. And that a sword and a scabbard is still pretty similar to just a sword. So it shouldn't be a D4 improvised weapon, it should actually be treated as the weapon. Pretty sure the player was just doing it for shits and giggles, of course, but they acted like they were serious, but you know, that player was not informed about further campaigns after that one. Not a loophole, just rules unlawyering, cause it was simply wrong and trying to bend the rules to power himself up. But back in 3.5, a player argued that since he was a rogue wielding dual daggers, he should be able to attack with both weapons every action, dealing damage equal to the dice of each dagger and applying sneak attack twice. Every single action. That guy was the epitome of the edgy main character syndrome, motherfucker. In my first ever game, my sister asked if her monk wizard character could get extra damage on an unarmed strike since she was under the effects of jump before the attack, essentially falling from a great height onto an enemy. Since I was a new GM, I decided to let her roll a dex check at a significant penalty, which she succeeded on. So I had her roll fall damage and transferred it to the enemy. I don't know if I'd ever allow this again, but in the moment it was fun. Everyone was stoked, and it's still a fun memory. Although it wouldn't work like that since the piercing is a worn object, you could do something similar by raw. You could cast darkness on a coin, and on each player's turn, they pick up the object from the ally holding it, close their fist around it so it stops, make their actions in combat, and then open their hand enough for it to spread again so that it still messes with their opponents, rinse and repeat. It wouldn't be too effective since darkness isn't too strong at giving advantage or disadvantage rules as written. Since no one can see each other, it also nulls itself out. My favorite I tried to hoodwink a DM with was in 3.5. You could enchantment an item to cast a spell on use for the cost of spell level, caster level, 1000 GP. I tried to convince the DM that a first level true strike spell enchanted by a first level caster on my weapon would give me a plus 20 to attack on use, and weapons are used by attacking for the low cost of a 1000 gold piece enchantment. It was fun to try. I was DMing Dragonlance for some friends and had been trying to make the module more friendly to our play group, and fix some of the dumber things not implemented super well by WotC. Early on in one of the scouting missions, I was explaining the surrounding territory and noted the mountains that were historically important and rumored to be a cursed and dangerous area to traverse, per the notes in the module itself. One of the players wanted to make a history check to recall knowledge about the mountains and the fortress within, and who owned it, and rolled high, so I figured I would shed a little more information, including base history and a snippet of the individual who ruled the fortress, mostly stuff that the book already included but wasn't enough to spoil any details they would figure out later on. Except, as part of the innocent information I gave, the player also asked for his first name, which I don't think is given in the book, so I kinda made it up. Well, because I full named Lord Soth super early on and this PC happened to have keen mind, they could recall it later when they obtained a magical item in the module that could summon him against his will. It's that magical candle, I forget what it's called. So they give a soldier the candle and use suggestion on him to attune and use the candle inside a bag of holding. Lots of setup to get him in and make this work. And they essentially gated Lord Soth into the bag, then put that bag into another, and blasted him into the aether. I was flabbergasted and looked into it all to see if it would work the way they wanted to, and I couldn't find any reasons why it couldn't. As far as I knew, suggestion on the soldier was for something he wouldn't know he would die from. The item gated the dude, and the bag itself was a different plane dimension, technically for the gate to work. So they kinda skipped that whole interaction. We kind of rushed the whole last chapter anyway, but it just threw me for a loop that they would figure this out. Back in 3.5, there was a spell called Stone to Flesh. It was intended to revive characters that had been turned to stone by a basilisk or something. The group came up on a metal door they couldn't pick, the lock, or force, so the player wanted to turn the wall next to the door into flesh and cut their way through. That's actually kind of smart based on the name itself. Most egregious loophole in the rules? And nothing in the rules actually says how many arms most PC races have. Thrycreans specifically have 4, and Plasmoids have a max of 2, but other races don't say at all. We all just choose to assume they have 2 arms, but there's no rules as written on it at all. Now, Raw, there's nothing stopping a reborn PC from having 4 arms, like DC Comics' Bride of Frankenstein. So weird she only gets 2 in the cartoon. And just dual-wielding swords while also carrying a shield and a spell focus. No sane DM will allow that, of course, but technically, the rules do. I had a Twilight Cleric player. In order to save himself from falling to his death, cast Moonbeam on himself, and then bonus action Steps of Night to give himself a fly speed, since Moonbeam fills the area with dim light. I did make him make the concentration check for the damage at least, but yeah, I couldn't really argue it too much. It was a nice move. Also note, I hate the XGE fall 500 feet immediately rule, so we weren't using it. In an Adventurers League game, there is a regular player with a level 10 Moon Druid who kept an awakened rat in a metal box that could operate a stone of controlling earth elementals. Using this, along with Conjure Elemental, and just being a Moon Druid, that was 3 earth elementals in every fight. This player would also try to argue that using Earth Glide to punch enemies from under the ground prevented them from retaliating. I ruled that if you punch them, that they can punch you back, and you will at least eat an opportunity attack. Most egregious examples usually come from another table one of my players DMs for. Last one was that they tried to argue that they could make the mount invisible, thereby turning the things it carries, the party, invisible alongside the mount. And I'm like, there's rules for mounting, and they're not the ones for carrying. Why did they even think that would work? Just upcast invisibility to affect several targets. It's really not that deep, guys. I had a guy who became petrified by a magical trap, and he genuinely tried to argue that since you become incapacitated when petrified, and incapacitated says you can't take actions or reactions, that he could take a bonus action while petrified. Because it didn't explicitly state that you couldn't. TLDR, he did not get his petrified bonus action and was removed from the group shortly later because it was clear he was not going to be a good fit. Also, I didn't know this rule at the time, but in the rule section for bonus actions, it states, anything that deprives you of your ability to take actions also prevents you from taking a bonus action. So in the end, he wasn't even technically right. I almost peed laughing from that one. That's a fairly popular strat that I've seen on Reddit a few times, by the way. There's also the cast it on your sword, sheath it to deactivate, that you may or may not get away with. You can also just do it on an object you can take in or out of your pocket if you wish, I guess. I let my players get away with a lot, but they know this and only ask for things within reason. But me as a player am always looking for fancy, stupid shit to do, and the worst one I ever did was... I was an illusion wizard, and I used Silent Image to recreate that scene from Mission Impossible where Tom Cruise and the guy from Shaun of the Dead were sneaking up the hallway, hiding behind a screen that projected the image of the empty hallway. So essentially, the DM let me make an intelligence check every time to see if I got the angles right as I manipulated the illusion, and moved it on my turn, essentially making the entire party able to stealth the whole way up to the guys we were attacking without being seen, despite being basically in an open clearing. If it wasn't for the uniqueness of the pitch, I don't think I had a chance in hell. But his eyes lit up as soon as I pitched, magically creating a Mission Impossible gadget, and we steamrolled the combat. A player wanted to use planar binding to have a concentration-free summon Celestial because he wanted something that could use a cursed sword that wasn't himself. I pointed out that casting a spell with a casting time longer than an action means that you need to concentrate for the casting time, which obviously means that he can't concentrate on Summon Celestial. So then, Glyph of Warding got involved to bypass Summon Celestial's concentration requirement, and a whole series of negotiations and justifications happened until I just put my foot down. To quote the Discord message I sent, the spell, Glyph of Warding, must target a single creature or an area. There is probably some wording shenanigans with saying that summon spells affect the chosen area by summoning something in that area. But frankly, I've had to look up 3 different spells, concentration rules, and I'm not even touching whether you can maintain concentration through a long rest if you don't need sleep. And just assuming that's how that works. Planar binding is unambiguously and thematically a valid spell for a spell glyph. It's literally a trap that binds the target. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know in the comments below what is the most egregious loophole that a player or players have tried to use at your table. And if you ever want to support the channel, you're more than happy to join our membership program. You don't have to, but if you do, you can help us keep the lights running and you get early access to videos. We love you all. Please be happy, be safe, and we'll see you next time. Toodaloo for now.